It's Friday, February 9th, 2024. Welcome to your Backcountry Snowpack Summary brought to you by North Shore Rescue. Well, we're still here, and frankly, I'm a little surprised that you are too. Last week we were able to ski some nice slush and some steep chutes. Of course, since then we got a skiff of snow, and then it got quite a bit colder. So now the snowpack is pretty much as tight as a frozen turkey. Now, we don't really have much of an avalanche issue right now, but with the snow that fell, a little bit of snow that fell this week, and the cold temperature, of course, that led to some faceting on the surface. So right now we have a really hard crust with on top of it some fairly sizable facets and surface hoar. So the surface is actually really quite weak, and we do have some weather coming this weekend. Now, there is some uncertainty about the freezing level. It does look like we're getting a fair bit of precipitation, but you know, last time I checked, the freezing levels is probably hovering around the 1200 mark. So, you know, everything that is up high might probably get a little bit of snow, and that will certainly be something to consider if you're venturing out trying to get some turns this weekend. Is all of that new snow is going to be sitting on facets on a crust, so that interface is likely not going to be very good. In fact, the fact that the snow is coming maybe a little bit warm and might be a little bit mixed with rain might actually help solve that problem by sort of destroying some of that surface hoar and some facets and helping the new snow bond. So fingers crossed for a good dump this weekend. But if it is the case, just be very careful, because this new snow is likely not going to bond very well to the old surface. Now, when I travel in the backcountry, there's always a couple of things that I carry in my pants, and every once in a while I like to whip them out. And every time I do that, especially if there's younger people around, I usually get some horrified stares until somebody eventually says, "Whoa, old man, put this back in your pants. This is not that kind of party." And of course, what I'm talking about here is a paper map and a compass. So that's what I wanted to talk about this week. So stick around if you want to know more about old school analog navigation. So the first question you might have is, you know, the phones are so good and so reliable these days. Why should I bother with this? And there's several reasons. One of them for sure is that it's good to have some redundancy in your system. So, you know, to make sure that you have two different ways to navigate. And for sure, if you're with a group, there's going to be more than one phone, and the likelihood of all of them failing is probably fairly minimal. But there's more than just the redundancy. I found that navigating with a map and compass actually connects you to the terrain in a way that electronic navigation doesn't do. It's a little bit like when you're driving somewhere using a GPS. If you have to go back to that same spot, you're probably going to have to use the GPS again. If you take the time to actually look at a map and sort things out, you actually connect with your surrounding much better. And that, of course, has a big implication when we're talking about avalanche problems that are specific to certain aspects in elevation. I would also argue that for some applications, the map and compass are actually much quicker than having to pull out your phone and pull the app and all of that. So in some cases, it's actually really, really efficient to just have the compass out and figure your way around. And finally, it's just fun. It's fun and it's gratifying to actually be able to navigate with these tools. One of my favorite partners these days is one of my sons, and we're actually forcing ourselves to put the phone away and try to navigate with the map and compass as much as we can. And of course, we always have the phone as a backup, and that's maybe another good aspect of navigating with these more is that it actually saves your battery. So your phone is kept there just in case you really start to wonder if you kind of messed it up or not. So before we get into it, maybe a little bit of a disclaimer. There is a lot to know about map and compass, and this is just an introduction to a few little tips that applies well to the skiing environment, but it's by no means an extensive lecture on how to use these tools. And I really do suggest that you either get a good book and, you know, get that from a local outdoor retailer or a local bookshop, or even better, seek in-person instruction. But more importantly, just don't go out and believe anything or everything a random guy tells you on YouTube. Now, I'll give you a little second to let the irony of this one sink in here. So the first thing I want to talk about is the maps. So there are several different considerations about maps, but some of the things that are important, maybe the most important is the scale. 1 to 20,000 to 1 to 25,000 is pretty good. When you get into the 1 to 30 or 1 to 50,000, for navigating small pieces of terrain, you just don't have the precision that you need. The second important part is the contour lines. So generally speaking, you'll have maps that have contour lines around every 20 meters. And that's a good spacing. Now, you have to be careful too, because what that means for us as skiers is that a cliff that is 10, 15, or even 20 meters tall with a bench after might actually just look like a nice slope. So especially around the North Shore here, there's a lot of those cliffs that are in the 5, 10, 15 meters high, but the map is actually not going to show those. So even if it looks like a nice gentle slope, you have to be very careful for these micro features that are not going to appear on the map. The magnetic variation on the map is a nice thing to have, but it's not strictly necessary. You can easily Google that, and that's generally what I prefer to do. If it could be made of waterproof paper, that's great. Otherwise, I typically carry either a map case or just a Ziploc bag to make sure that I protect it from moisture. And if we have specific needs, it is possible to actually get a custom map. You can even print it out at home from one of the mapping softwares, such as CalTopo, or if you want to have a nice bigger map, you can go to some retailers. Like this map here of the Tantalus Range was printed for me by Valhalla Pure Outfitters in Squamish, and it's essentially the base map of CalTopo, so it's nice to have that paperback. So next on our list is the compass. So some of the key things that I find on a compass is having an adjustable magnetic declination is pretty important to me. Otherwise, I mean, you can always do the math, but most skiers I know don't do math very well. Another thing that I like about this compass is that it does actually have an inclinometer. So I can actually use this when I'm doing snow profile to have my slope angles. Having a mirror is nice, but not strictly necessary, but it's certainly good for sort of more advanced navigation feature. It can always serve as a signaling mirror as well in an emergency. And it also allows to keep the compass a little bit farther away from your body. One thing to keep in mind is that transceivers will interfere with compasses. So we are typically concerned with stuff interfering with our transceivers. But in this case, if you have the compass right against you, as you should if you don't have a mirror, and it's right against the transceiver will actually deviate the needle of the compass. Another really important tool with these two is to have an altimeter. My altimeter is nothing special. I've had it for well over 10 years now. It's set with barometric pressure. There's a newer watch with the GPS and all of that. We'll use the GPS for altitude. They're both pretty accurate. You have to be careful too. If you do have one of those watch with the GPS function, they tend to interfere with transceivers. So when you're doing a transceiver search, make sure that you're doing it with the hand that doesn't have the watch on it. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is how to orient the map. So the easiest way to do this is to first put the north of your compass at the very top here. Now we're going to put the compass on the map, making sure that we're lining up the north with the top of the map. And then we rotate everything until the magnetic red needle is in the house that's printed on the compass. So now I know that my map is oriented in space, and if I want to look straight ahead here, I know that this is what I'm seeing. Generally speaking, when I'm skiing, it's very rare that I will take like a very precise compass bearing. In fact, if I have a plan that is telling me that I have to be really precise with my compass, I will probably try to reevaluate that plan. It means that I have to hit a very, very small target. And as much as I can, I will try to use big targets like a lake or a road or something where it doesn't really matter where you're actually going to hit it. Once you're on the road, you know roughly where you are. So generally speaking, I'm more going to use the compass with general cardinal points. So if, for example, we were here on the shoulder and we wanted to ski down and get back to the lake and get back to our campsite that is right here, what I know is from here, essentially, I have to go directly northwest, right? And this is a tricky one because I'm on a very broad ridge, and as soon as I start to dip down below tree line here, very quickly I'm actually going to lose the sight of the lake. So I know that I need to go northwest. So I'm actually going to get my compass to the northwest right here. And then as I'm skiing, I'm going to turn again until the magnetic needle is in the house, and I know that this is the direction that I want to go. What is very likely to happen as I start to ski down and I get in below tree line and I lose sight of everything is that I could actually end up, the terrain would lead me this way. And as I'm going this way, if I stop at any point and I'm looking down the fall line and I'm trying to orient my compass and I realize that straight fall line is actually going directly north, it means that I'm actually off the ridge. And if I keep skiing in this direction, I'm essentially going to miss my target. So what I would do here is like, okay, let's start by skiing northwest and try to keep that. And whenever we have a choice where the terrain could lead us a little bit to the right or to the left, we'll try to favor the left every time. So if we favor the left every time, eventually we might actually look at our bearing in the fall line and realize, oh, we're on a west facing aspect, which is completely fine, because if we keep skiing on the west facing aspect, we're actually going to hit the lake, and then it's going to be very easy to make it to our campsite. Whenever I have a chance, I try to handrail things, and the thing that I handrail the most is actually an elevation band. So if I started skiing here and I realized, oh, you know what, that skiing on the north aspect is much nicer than here, the trees are more open, and this is where I want to ski, I will go, okay, well, you know, my campsite here is just below 1,200 meters. So I'm just going to enjoy my skiing on the north side, not really worrying too much, and keeping an eye on my elevation. And once I get to an elevation just above 1,200, I'm going to start traversing a hard left until I hit the lake and hopefully my campsite. It is also possible to take a bearing from the terrain and transpose it to your map. So if you're skiing in this area and you know your elevation, but you don't know exactly where you are, you can look down the fall line. And as you look down the fall line, you're going to bring the compass here so that the red magnetic needle is lined up with a house. And this is giving you like the direction of the fall line. So if you know that you are at, let's say, 1,400 meters, and that you are looking straight down the fall line, and the fall line is in a westerly direction, at the place where the contour line is facing directly west at 1,400, this is, you know, pretty close to exactly where you are. So the final thing that I want to touch on is looking at the terrain on the map. There are numerous cases of SAR response that were caused by people starting down. And the North Shore mountains are notorious for this, where as you get down, it gets steeper and steeper and steeper. People kept going and going and going until at one point it's just too steep. And it's so steep that it can't really go down, but they can't really come back up the way they came either. So, you know, having a good look at the map, and before you're committing to anything, look at those contour lines. And if they're getting tighter and tighter and tighter, you know that your way out is not by continuing on down. So make sure before you commit to anything that you know where you're going and you know what the terrain is going to look like, and that you know how you're going to get out of there. Another thing that will happen a lot around here is that skiing in tight trees is very similar to skiing in a whiteout, in the sense that you don't really have a good view of the terrain. So you're kind of skiing along, and the terrain will generally tend to lead you into a gully. It's going to lead you into a creek. There is a reason the creek is there. It's because the terrain leads there. And when you're looking at a map and you see a creek that has those sharp V's in the contour lines, these are areas that you absolutely have to avoid. These are really steep, really cliffy gullies, and they're just really, really nasty. And when people get in there, very often it's very difficult to get out. So that's all I got for this week. I really encourage you to get some paper maps and compass and play around with it. If only because it's a fun and gratifying thing to do, but also because it increases your connection to the terrain, increases your safety, and gives you a backup for your navigation.